recording now. And that recording will be sent out to you either later on this afternoon or tomorrow. So keep an eye out for that. I know there's going to be a lot of fantastic information that's going to be covered during the session. So if you want to go back and reference anything, please feel free to do so. Also attached to that recording is going to be a questionnaire. We value your opinion as students and alumni here at WGU. A lot of the sessions that we end up hosting are based off of the feedback that you all provide. So it should take you no more than 2 minutes to fill out that questionnaire. So we certainly would appreciate that feedback. I'll also share that in the chat later on in the session. So if you do want to just grab it quick and provide us that feedback, that would be fantastic. This is a session that is part of Career Quest, which is our month-long event that we have here in Career and Professional Development at WGU. So today's session, we also have another session later on this afternoon, followed by a few more fantastic sessions on Wednesday and Thursday, and then next week is the final events that we'll be having for Career Quest. So certainly take advantage of those sessions if you haven't done so already. Great opportunity to connect with industry professionals, or if it's a specific company that's looking to hire our WGU grads. Like I said, great opportunity to connect with those individuals and really build out that network. One thing I certainly would encourage everybody here on the call is, everyone's here to learn about building their own brand, but also let's take the opportunity to expand your professional network. So if people want to share their LinkedIn in the chat, feel free to do so. It's a great opportunity to connect with your peers, with other alumni, and really build out that professional network. So I would certainly recommend doing so. So if you'd like, share your LinkedIn in the chat, connect with each other. You never know what type of opportunities might present themselves from there. All right, so from here, what I'm going to do is I'm certainly going to stop talking and I'm going to pass it over to our presenter, Tosin. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And I will right away share screen. Okay. Can you see all the slides and everything okay?
All good.
Perfect. Okay, so thank you so much for coming. I know that you probably got like one little blurb about who I am and what I want to talk about, but hopefully this will be really helpful. Today, of course, I'm talking about building a brand that lasts, and like my subtitle to that is longer than any job title, and designing your career like a strategist. And so I will share a little bit of my story later, but for now, I just kind of want to get into the content and it will all weave together. So I think that we can all agree that as humans, we have some type of innate value and it's gifted to us for no other reason other than that we exist. And each of us are wholly unique. But there's 8 billion of us with no repetition, and it creates this interesting tension between our ability to define and communicate our own value, what makes us irreplaceable, when there are so many other people out there and we instinctually know this. And so it feels like you're just kind of a drop in the ocean. Anyone who's ever been out in nature or in a really large crowd, you kind of feel really tiny, but then it's also really cool because you know you're an individual. And so I asked myself this question a long time ago, and I talked to so many other people who are asking themselves a form of this question of what makes me indispensable. And I open with this because it's something that we're going to ponder throughout this entire talk or workshop, however you want to look at it. And the answer is exactly what needs to be encapsulated and communicated to the world, and how you present online, offline, in person, all around. So let's start with some terms so that we know we're all speaking the same language. I love this quote by Marty Neumeyer. And if you do marketing or anything, I don't know how many MBAs are in the room. That was what I studied at WGU, spoiler. But you've probably heard this before. A brand is a person's gut feeling about a product, service, or company. But we are none of those things. We are human beings. And so the way that I co-opt this definition is that a personal brand is other people's gut feeling when they think about you. It's not really about what you say about yourself, it's what others believe and remember and trust when your name comes up when you're not in the room. So, how are brands created? The thing about branding is that any entity, yourself included, that has ever existed for any length of time has a brand, and either it's intentionally curated or it's left up to chance. But people always have an opinion, even if it's a weak one or a negative one. And every single person we meet, we form an opinion really, really quickly. So some people will not resonate with us, and that's okay. But in professional settings, it serves us to know who we want to collaborate with and present ourselves how we like to be perceived. We can't control the response, but we can control our presentation. So I always break this down into like three steps. Everything is always in threes for me because I like it and it's easy. But first, you have either a negative or a positive experience, you form a memory, and you leave a lasting impression on people. And then those moments become stories worth sharing. And then those shared stories ultimately become your brand. So I see a personal brand as having three functions. One is recognition. Your brand helps people quickly recognize you and choose you from an overwhelming array of options. Remember that like sample size of 8 billion. So we all know if you've been applying to jobs in today's market, like, and you see on LinkedIn, it's always, always like over 100 applicants. It seems like no matter how quickly you see the job posting. And so how do people recognize who you are, not just like your name and you as a person, but what kind of bucket you land in, what kind of person you are. And then there's this reassurance aspect where your branding communicates credibility, quality, reassuring others that they've made the right choice in trusting you. That's what you're doing in an interview. They've already seen your resume and they already think, hey, this might fit into the bucket of the type of person that we're looking for. And now I want to see if they're credible. And then that operation kind of continues as you continue to interact with people, perhaps as you're working there, or if you're working with like a client directly as you're going with them. And then recall. So your brand leaves a lasting impression through language, imagery, consistent signals so that people remember you and return to you. So this is that element that I keep seeing of like what happens when you're not in the room. It's easy to remember somebody and get the feeling, whatever feeling you get when you're around them, if they're sitting right in front of you and they're talking to you. But when you're not there, like what do people remember about you? What's that gut feeling? Okay, so then one more definition for you, branding. So then I call branding the act of showing up in a deliberate way that shapes people's impressions, emotions, and decisions about you. Now, it's easier to think about this when we're thinking about inanimate objects, so like products and things like that. So if we think of like a lipstick or something, of course, the company goes through all sorts of different marketing efforts. They might be posting on social media. When you go in person to a store, the store is designed a certain way. Their customer service agents act a certain way, all to influence. But when we think about that as us, like we are the product, unfortunately, in this type of situation, there's all sorts of different things that we can and should be doing to influence people's impressions. And again, even if you're like, if it feels a little bit weird and you're like, well, I'm a person, that's absolutely true. But the thing is, it's happening anyway. Every single time you show up, you're wearing a certain outfit or you're behaving in a certain way. It all will be building and forming your personal brand, whether you like it or not. So we might as well be really intentional about it. So I did share that I would talk a little bit about myself and my story. When we think about personal branding, it can sound really abstract, like logos and LinkedIn headlines and clever elevator pitches, but it shows up, as I've been explaining, in the story the people tell themselves about you. And so to show you what I mean, I'd like to share my own journey. And on paper, what you're seeing on screen is kind of what I expected for myself. I was going to study hard. I was going to earn the right degrees. I went to UBC in Canada. If I have any Canadians in the room or people who are familiar, it's in Vancouver. Then I went on and I got a master's degree in Harvard. And I was planning after that, I was like, I'm going to work a corporate job for like 10 to 15 years, and then I'm going to start my own business, which is the logo on the right there, and launch my own practice. But as you'll see, my actual path looked very, very different. And those twists and the setbacks is where my personal brand really started to take shape. And I'm grateful that things didn't go as planned, because I really don't think I could be memorable or indispensable without it. So this is little tiny me, just a little girl without a care in the world. And at this stage, I had no concept of what people expected of me, just curiosity and possibility. And I grew up, like I said, in Alberta, in Edmonton, Alberta, which is like Midwest of Canada. And in this environment, standing out was inevitable. Like, it was so snowy, it was so suburban. I was like, we were like the only family of color. And I realized early that if people were going to notice me, I wanted it to be for the right reasons. And that's when I began, without knowing it, to think about how I presented myself to the world. So this was me, still kind of a baby, but less so than in the top left. Graduating from UBC, I had probably pulled so many all-nighters, because at this time I was studying design. I'm trained as an architect. That's what I went to Harvard for. And I don't know if you guys have had any friends, or if you yourself have gone to like design school and know studio culture. Like, there's just so much, you don't really do as many tests and exams, but they compensate for that suffering and just workload. And so I was like fully in it, completely working hard, burning myself out. And I was chasing these markers of success, instead of thinking of myself as like this unique person who I have so much to offer to the world. I just thought, well, I need to work twice as hard as everybody around me, so that I'm known as like this hard worker. I wanted to be known for excellence. Like, that was what my family pushed, that's what my cultures pushed. And I was pursuing architecture because I was like, that's a pretty respectable path. Like, I don't really know, there was kind of like, I'm come from an immigrant family from Nigeria, and so it's like, you can be a doctor, a lawyer, engineer, architect, kind of fits in that bucket. Sure, you can do that. But there was not a lot of other things that you were able to do. So I was allowing external validation to define my joy, and I was striving for somebody else's version of success. But then a shift happened. I think it happened for all of us in 2020, and now like almost 6 years ago, which is crazy, where I started using my design skills in new ways and sharing my work online. And some of this work was spatial, but some of it was like graphic, and I was doing like art and all sorts of different things just for fun. And we were all staying at home, and so I had a little bit more flexibility to experiment. And it really began to shape how I wanted to be perceived in the world as a designer, an academic, an entrepreneur. And I got very thoughtful from that time on for with how I positioned myself for different opportunities. And it ended up growing my network, it grew my social media accounts, and in turn, my career. And that intentionality created opportunities. And my personal brand became a launch pad, enabling me to build a design agency, build relationships, speak like what I'm doing right now, write for different publications, and establish authority in my field. And that's really the takeaway here. When you're thoughtful about how you present yourself, you give yourself options, and a strong personal brand opens doors. So now I own my consultancy. We do brand strategy and design, and every day I get to work with different leaders who leverage personal branding to accelerate their careers and different entrepreneurial endeavors. And I know this works because I did it for myself, and I've watched and worked with dozens of different business leaders doing the same thing. So this is my more accurate to my real path. And honestly, I still think this is super simplifying it, but it was not linear. It was full of different pivots and setbacks and new opportunities. And a personal brand can help you navigate that nonlinear career. There was no big 10, 15 years climbing my way up the corporate ladder. I ended up working a million different jobs to pay my way through all this different schooling, and then realizing in that, because like Harvard has reciprocity with MIT, I started my MBA there, and then I graduated and I started working, and then I continued and finished my MBA at WGU. And I know that you guys are going to be able to relate to this because I feel like that's like what's so special about WGU is that it attracts those of us who are pivoting, that are doing things in an unconventional way, who want to live flexibly either by choice or just by circumstance. Like you have kids or you work a job like I did and do, and like can't just go back and take time off to do school full time. But I think that that's really special, and knowing how to like identify these things and make micro adjustments as you evolve and grow in life ensures that your career trajectory is well directed and you're not just like launching yourself into the first instinct direction that you wanted to go or that somebody told you to go when you were like 17 years old in a guidance counselor's office. Okay. So, question for the chat. I can't see it, but if you guys pop it in there, maybe somebody can read it out, or I will read the answers after. As a professional, what are some things that you do to influence your personal brand image? I'll keep talking as you type those out. I've been kind of hinting at it before, but like, again, this is easier to think about with products and services, but as a person, like what are some actions you think that are part of like your branding? In about 30 seconds. Okay, so I have some answers on the screen. Starting pretty obviously, things like your social media presence, if you have like a personal website, I think like press features, talks, relationships, those things I think are a little bit more obvious. But I also think about like how you interact with your peers, if you're going on like coffee chats with people in person or virtually, how you relate to your different mentors and people who are in your life. All these things are influential. Like I think about like clothing, for example. We think about people like Steve Jobs or whoever who's like they had a uniform and that's all they wore and that was a big part of their personal brand. But I would say even if you're nowhere near that stringent with it, I'm certainly not. And I have like three different outfit personalities and today I'm wearing all black, but you'll definitely see me wearing wild colors and stuff. But I would say that I'm always a little tiny bit overdressed. And that was kind of unintentional. It's just who I was. But then I started noticing the people like said that about me. And like my friends or random people I knew would be like, oh, Tosin always like is having the greatest outfits and stuff like that. And it made a lot of sense because I'm a creative and I'm a designer and I talk about things like this, personal branding. So perfect. It's in alignment with who I want to resonate with and how I want to make them feel. Perfect. Okay. So, another quote for you this one from the book Go Giver. All things being equal, people will do business with and refer business to those that they know, like, and trust. Now, again, if you're in business circles, you've probably heard this like know, like, and trust thing before, but I think it's really important to think about whether you are an entrepreneur or not. Of course, if you're an entrepreneur, this is so important. And yeah, like it's going to be hard to get a client if they don't just like you. And that's why we see a lot of this, like, people will joke about just because somebody's a golf course buddy and things like that, that's why they do business together. It's intentional and it's for a reason. But the same goes for being hired into a more traditional 9 to 5 job. Personally, I have never gotten a job off of just cold applying online without so much as like a referral or somebody who I know in the company. And I've worked a lot of jobs before. So it's just something to keep in mind and think about. It's infinitely easier to move through life professionally if people know you, like you, and trust you, and like in that order. So like I just said, there's an order to this. And so these are the 5 steps that I always think about when it comes to building a personal brand that lasts, irrespective of what your job title is. First things first is awareness. People have to know that you exist and they need to be able to hear about your work. And you can do this through in person networking, social media, referral, or mention. But this is a huge thing because so much of us are just not out there enough. Like, not enough people are seeing what we're doing and seeing what we're up to. And you can turn the volume up or down on this based on your comfort level. I know that there's some of us who might be very private and not want to be like all over social media. And then some people who don't care and they actually want, like, they would love to have like a million followers. But regardless of what your ambitions are, people have to know about you. And so I'd say if you land on the side of the spectrum where it's like, I want to live a very private life, but I still want to have a successful career, maybe you're thinking about this in the scale of the workplace. Are you super quiet and super to yourself and you never speak up in meetings? You never, will like elect to talk to anybody outside of like the person who sits directly next to you? It might be difficult, right? When like promotion conversations are happening, your name will never come up, even if you're doing excellent at your job, because like you just never come up, right? Like people are not even aware of your existence or who you are or anything about your personality. So making sure you're vocal in that way. And if you land on the opposite side of the spectrum, closer to where I'm at, you want to be like active on LinkedIn, active on whatever social channel makes sense for your career. For me, it's like Instagram because I'm a very visual person. And making sure that like you're posting things that are shareable and that are relatable so that your name can just get out there a little bit more and people can feel curious and check out what you're up to. And then step two is appreciation. So once somebody knows you exist, um, on something like social media, the action would be like to follow or connect with you, adding you to their network. Maybe if you're like an academic, they might go read your research. If you're applying to jobs, they might accept your resume or invite you in for an interview. Just like a small action that usually takes not as much commitment to show that, like, hey, I resonate with you and I liked the way that your content or your vibe or your energy made me feel. And I will keep coming back to these two things because I always say it's all about who would you like to speak to and how would you like them to feel when they interact with you or your content. And then third is action. So this requires a little bit more commitment, usually like small sacrifice on a person's part. So when a person offers up something that they find valuable, oftentimes money or their time, then it means that like that appreciation step worked. And so again, this could be a job interview, it could be a meeting. If you ask somebody who you admire their career, like, hey, would you be able to do a 30-minute Zoom with me? And they say yes, like time is really valuable to people, especially as they move up in their career. So that's a really good action item. It might be working with you on a project. They might hire you for something and literally give you money. They might purchase a product from you if you are an entrepreneur. And I have some stats to back this up. 60% of jobs are found through networking, not online job sites. And so that kind of backs up my experience. I definitely land in that bucket where most career opportunities have come to me through networking. And 57% of employers are less likely to interview a candidate that they can't find online. And so these two things kind of just back up some of the points that I was sharing earlier with, the importance of like having enough brand awareness and having some type of maybe online presence, even if it's just your work and nothing to do with like your face and your personal life and things like that. Just making sure that you are intentionally influencing your brand. And then step four is adherence. And so I like to call this like anything that repeats. So if somebody is coming back to you again and again to work on more projects, if you spoke for something and then they ask you to speak again because you did such a great job, anything that's showing loyalty, like, if you have a coworker who's always coming to ask you and wants to work with you, or your manager is assigning tasks to you, people are essentially adhering to your personal brand. And the stat I could find for this is like very much in business terms, but I'm going to relate it back to those of us who are not going that route for now. The cost of acquiring a new client is 5 times higher than the cost of retaining an existing client. So those of us in business know that like customer retention is huge. Actually, maybe people don't, because I actually do have some clients who are always looking for more and more and more customers, but it's like, are we focusing on what experience the people have when they are your customer or client, and whether they're just going to return back to you? And as with everything in your professional career, if it works for business products and services, it will also work for you as an individual moving up your career ladder. It is so much harder, as we all know, to find a new job than to keep the same one. And it's going to take probably 5 times as much energy to go out and find a new role than to just like shoot up the ladder in your own role. That's not to say that you shouldn't, switch jobs if that's what's best for you. Like that might be where the best pay raises and things like that come from. But even like, impressing people who are already in your network and then using them to become your advocates, which is going to actually be the next step. It's so much easier than like finding a new person and then starting from step one again, where they become aware of you and then they have to appreciate what you do and take an action and all those things. So then step 5, as I mentioned, is advocacy. So these are things like referrals, like when somebody becomes your advocate, that means that they trust you enough to bet their reputation on aligning their personal brand with yours. So it's actually a pretty big ask, which is why sometimes it can feel intimidating to message someone on LinkedIn or ask somebody to, refer you to a job. Maybe they know somebody in the company or they work in the company themselves. Like at the surface, that shouldn't be such a scary ask. But the reason that it is I think because we sense internally that it's like, that's a risk, because that means that this person trusts me enough and thinks highly of me enough that they're willing to align their personal brand with my personal brand. So that's where you want to get, right? And this is them all in summary. And the main goal is to move a significant number of people through your career, through your networking, through your entire personal branding journey, through this journey until you have many advocates. When people have many advocates, they often are very, very successful and very, very wealthy. When you think about anybody who is famous or is just like really at the top of their career, usually it's because they have just at any drop of the finger, like 1,000 people who would be willing to vouch for them. And so we can do this in smaller scales or big scales in our own life, depending on what your career ambitions are. Okay, I'm coming to the end of this. And so you can start thinking of any questions or comments that you might have. But this is all of my information, and I'm always happy to talk offline about any of these topics or these things, or if you're just like curious about anything that's going on. But yeah, I think that that's me for this talk, and I'm excited to open it up to discussion.
And as people are thinking about questions, feel free to post those into the chat and we will read those off. Just a reminder that this session is being recorded. So Tosin had touched on a lot of different topics that I feel like, might want to go back and take a, second listen to, so you can always go back and do that. So certainly take advantage, and then the questionnaire that will be attached to that. Tosin, I appreciate you just sharing your story. I think that is something that anybody can really take away and apply. So I appreciate you sharing that. One question that did just come in: how did you come up with your brand name?
My brand name. So my brand name is Atelier Oluwatosin, and it breaks every single rule that I would like suggest. Now I do naming actually a lot with so many of my clients, and I'm like, should be memorable, it should be easy to spell, like easy to Google and all those things, and it's just like not for me. But atelier is essentially just the word for workshop in French. Some people really know that, other people don't. And Oluwatosin is my full first name. So I go by Tosin. My full name is Oluwatosin. So that's how I came up with it. It was nothing crazy, but it just essentially means like studio Tosin, me.
As people are thinking of questions, one question that I have, I'd love to know like your approach to networking. Like what are some things that you do to really build out your professional network? Do you have like a go-to, I don't want to say go-to move, but like something that you've relied on that's really paid off? previously with networking with industry professionals, and maybe that's cross industries, not necessarily somebody within your own industry.
Yeah, yeah. I actually think that the last sentence that you said there has been a big game changer in networking for me. So, as mentioned, originally I was trained as an architect, and of course, now I also have my MBA, and the emphasis in MBA is very like networky. You talk to a lot of people both in your field and outside of your field. And though WGU is online, so there wasn't as heavy of an emphasis on that. The first bit of my degree that I started at MIT, I really noticed that. However, in architecture school, it's almost the opposite. It's very like insular, and a lot of people would just talk to each other. Like I said, they slam you with workload, and so you just spend so much of your time like in studio with the same group of people who you're going through the program with. Um, but I was always very, very intentional because I had already started my business and started some entrepreneurial endeavors while I was in graduate school. And so I knew that like I need to meet people outside of my field. And I think that depending on what field you're in, that's like lost on people. And people never think like, like architects don't really hire other architects. Lawyers don't really hire as many other lawyers. And so maybe I need to be meeting like a more diverse array of people. And so I'm really grateful and glad that I did that. I'm grateful that I like took other classes outside of my degree program, that I exposed myself. I was like going to yoga and like talking to people in the yoga studio and, just going to all sorts of events and things. And I would say that that was like step one of expanding my network and my bubble, which has now become the foundation of everything else I do. And then a tip and a strategy is, I'm an introvert and I'm actually a very shy person, though no one would ever guess that. And people will like argue with me tooth and nail about it all the time. Everyone except for maybe my husband, who's like, oh no, you are like once you get to know you deeply. And so I never think that like you have to be the most bold and outgoing and gregarious personality to be able to build a strong network. It's really just about like being so intentional about putting yourself in positions where you get to meet people, whether it be online or in person, that you think would be great to know, and being so kind to every single person you come across, whether or not you think that they could give you something or benefit your career at that very moment. Networking is essentially making a ton of acquaintances or a ton of friends. And then in the event that later on there's a way to collaborate and work together, then you can. And thinking about it that way for me has like taken a lot of pressure off where, I'm not at an event or a party, I'm just thinking like, who's going to hire me here? Who's going to be my next client? But just thinking like, man, I really like her jacket. And then giving myself a tiny little pep talk and being like, okay, I'm going to go over there and I'm going to tell her that. And I'm going to, ask a couple questions and have some in my back pocket and get to know her. And if the conversation ends in 30 seconds, then it ends. But oftentimes it doesn't. And they really wanted someone to come talk to them too. And so we just end up talking for some time.
I love that. I think that that fear of like, okay, this is going to end in 30 seconds really, people get hung up on that, and you just never know unless you go up and do it. And one thing that we try to tell people is, hey, like when you go to an event or any type of, just walk away with one attempt, like one attempt, and then okay, then you have a positive experience and you build on that. So I love that you brought up that point. Um, one question that did come in, what are some of your first steps when you officially decided that you wanted to start a branding company?
Yeah. So this all happened in 2020, and I know I kind of breezed through that story because I wanted to give time for you to ask questions and see what was of interest. But I can share the story a little bit more in detail now that I know there is interest in it. It was 2020, and actually at that time I was fully thinking, like I said, that very linear path. I was thinking I'm going to finish this degree. At the time I had already been accepted into Harvard. Crazy, whoa, like huge school. I'm going to go through that and I'm going to go work at this big architecture firm and do that. And maybe down the line I'll start my own practice because that could be kind of cool. um, but of course everything kind of got turned on its head in 2020, and like I had an internship that I was supposed to do that got canceled because all their construction projects got canceled. And I was kind of faced with this like thing where I'm like, okay, well, I can sit at home like in my parents' house because that's like where I had to move to because my apartment was like it was a little scary at the time in Vancouver and like just be collecting government stimulus checks or let's see what else I can do. And so I had all these hard skills where because I was in design school the entire time, I also studied art. I was like, well, I have a good aesthetic eye. I know how to use like Adobe Creative Suite and like all these different graphic design programs. Maybe I can do like logos and things for people. And I started out doing that for like, I think it was like 50 or $100 per logo. And I was like, I'm making bank. And it's definitely not the same anymore. But it was really something that I stumbled into. And once it started to grow and I saw that there is interest there, that's when I started taking it really seriously. And so let me try to answer your question more directly. I can't pinpoint like an exact date, but I can kind of pinpoint an era. And it was, where I kind of showed in that grid of photos where there's like a photo of me with like my hair really big and everything, where I started posting on social media my work, seeing random people respond, not just people in my life, and realizing like, oh, I can actually make a pretty serious income. Like it had replaced the income that I was going to make working as an intern at a pretty established firm off of doing my own thing. Maybe this is something I want to explore. And then really leaning into that, seeing like what happens when I pitch my work to places and see if I can get press. And then that worked. And I got even more clients. And then realizing like all of a sudden I was like, I think I have a business on my hands. And so that's when I really leaned into it. I started reading all sorts of business books and listening to podcasts and doing all the good self education. And I made my first hire. And that was when I was like, okay, like now it's not just me. Somebody else is also depending on me to pay a salary, even though it's part time. But I still want to make sure that their payroll is met every month. And till date, 6 years later, their payroll is met every month. So thank goodness. And so I knew that I needed to learn a little bit about business. And that was kind of the turning point for me. And by that point, I was like already in architecture school. So I kind of knew. I was like, okay, I'm going to finish this because I said was when I start something, I'm going to finish it. But I think I'm going to own a business. And I think that architecture will be a part of that business. But I'm not sure that I will follow the path that I was going to before. I hope that answered the question.
Next question that came in through the chat. How do you educate people you work with who may not be familiar with WGU?
That's a great question. I'm also going to stop sharing so that I can see you and then see the chat, which helps me. Hopefully, you had enough time to get the information. Help me reread the question. Um, Educating people about WGU. So, yeah, I mean, it for me and my resume, I mean, it's such a dichotomy because it's like a school there I have schools on there that are everyone knows and then a school like WGU that less people know. And like it's never actually been something that like anyone's asked me or attacked me about, but I anticipated it and I was maybe like incorrectly fearful about it and thought, oh, do I now have to like I've started this trend and I need to like go to Harvard Business School or something for people to respect the degree. But I just simply did my research and was like, like a degree is a degree and I know better than anybody that it doesn't matter like what the brand name of the school is and this is what's going to work for my life at this time. So when I introduce myself to people and when I explain my education, I say exactly what happened. I say this is the school I was in and this is where I started studying business and then I started working and while I was practicing and working I joined a competency based program and I went and I pursued my MBA, and that school was called WGU. And never once has anyone asked me any weird questions about what it is. Either they know the school, I've met some alumni as well who are like, cool, me too, or they don't know the school. And, it's just never been a problem. So I think that a lot of that has been, a lot of that anticipation of like, oh, I'm going to need to educate people about it for me was a little bit in my head, but that's not to invalidate like if you've had an experience where people are questioning it. I think it's just about knowing and just being like, oh, this is what it is. It's a competency based program. It's all online, and I took many proctored exams and studied very hard at 9 p.m. at night, and I earned my degree. Okay.
Next question, and I love this because I feel like this is no matter what, conversation we end up having. This is built, built in. Have you started to incorporate AI in your processes, and how do you feel about its use in design?
Yeah, yeah. So I have been incorporating AI since probably it came on the scene, and more so, so we haven't used it as much for image generation and design work, more so for the strategy and communications piece that we do. I have found that the LLMs, like the large language models, I think have come a little bit further so far than the image generation, perhaps because people use it more, at least for the style of imagery that we do. We do use it to like mock up and render. Like I think that it's pretty decent with things that are like supposed to be photorealistic, especially if you like put grain on it or something after to like take away that silkiness that can happen. But when it comes to like things like graphic design work for our style, it's not quite aligned yet. But what we have implemented it the most heavily for is when we do strategy work, because we had years and years of like decks and like research and things like that that we had done from other clients. It was very easy for us to like train our own AI models, upload like hundreds of pages of documentation and being like, okay, now here's the client, here's the transcript from the intake meeting we had with them. Can you take this and then apply all this strategy and create like a presentation deck for them? And it just speeds up. Of course, you're going to have to take your human eye and edit it after that, but it definitely saves a lot of work up front. Reading these questions. I agree. I agree that WG is incredibly ethical with the pricing and all sorts of things. And, I for sure, like I said, I think I have like a cool perspective because I've done like probably just the most traditional path of education that you possibly could, and then switched to WGU. So I've seen the pros and cons of both. But yeah, like I would say that the finances is just, it's just something like you cannot be like, like to be so transparent, I am hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt from my Harvard education. And cool, like cool, I have Harvard and things like that, but it's just, it's crazy. And I didn't have to take out any debt at all to go and pursue my MBA. And so it's just one of those things where it like depends on what you want in life, depends what you're trying to pursue. Like for me, I love to teach and I teach as well. And so it's cool and important that I have schools that are like Ivy Leagues on my resume. But if that's not something I was pursuing, I wouldn't recommend anybody to like go ahead and do what I did. Okay, I see another question from Dana here. Your consultancy, Atelier Tosin, blends design, strategy, and storytelling. How has your own cultural identity and background influenced the way that you approach branding, both for yourself and for your clients? It has a huge influence. First of all, many of my clients, not all, but many come to me because there's something in my background or one of my team members' backgrounds that attracted them, especially some of our bigger clients. Like I would say we have a lot of small businesses that like they simply just like the way that our designs look. And so they go ahead and hire us. But we've been able to break in and get some like really big clients like Harvard, like MIT, like some big schools, University of Calgary in Canada, who oftentimes our way in was, they were doing a campaign for maybe Black History Month, or they were, they have like a specific office that needed and they wanted our specific perspective. And so, of course, in that work, we bring it into it a little bit more heavily. Um, and so, yeah, so I would say that it comes into, whether we like it or not. I always tell, as I just mentioned, I teach as well. And I'm always telling my students, like, bring the fullness of your subjectivity, right? Like, you are a subjective person. And so bring that in. Like, I want your unique lived experience. I want you to, like, talk about, like, where you grew up and how you grew up and, like, all those different things, because that's what makes especially creative work so special. And I would say strategy work as well. We do a lot of stuff that has to do with customers and consumers. And I love like our team is like really mixed and diverse and people from all sorts of like people across Canada and the US and Europe. And even we have some people from Africa working with us. And I love to like staff my projects according to who the customers and the clients and the end users are going to be and be like, hey, like this person on our team is like really close to who your customer is. And so we're going to put them on your project. And so just bringing that in to the way that we approach branding. Thanks.
As we wait for a couple more questions here, just a reminder to everybody, session is being recorded. So make sure you keep an eye out for that recording, which will come via email. Also attached to that is the questionnaire. So definitely take the time to fill that out. I'm actually going to grab the questionnaire now and post it into the chat, but I'll give people another minute to post any questions that they might have. And then Tosin, I want to give you the opportunity, as we're kind of wrapping up, like any closing remarks that you might have that you want to just end on for those that are attending today.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, as you've been mentioning this, I've been like looking back through the chat and I don't feel like I did Sandra's question due diligence. I'm very big on like answering the question. And so I wanted to say, like, at a really practical level, when I officially decided I wanted to start a business, I would say that the first thing I did was I went and made my own website. Um, yeah, like, maybe for some people that's the path. For other people, you're like, I'm not going to do that. So then you hire somebody to do that. And then I registered my business, or actually, that's not true. I operated my business, at least in Canada. It's probably different in the US. You can operate a business just as a freelancer up until a certain revenue mark, which at the time I think was 30,000. And so I just did my thing until I hit that revenue mark. And then that's when I registered a business. I think that before I registered it, I actually made my first hire, which is backwards and there was no need, but it was because I was a full-time student. And so I like school started and I was like, oh shoot, like I'm not going to have time to service my clients. And that's why I did it that way, but I would recommend it the other way. And so that's what I did. And then, just the taxes and everything. Sorry, I wanted to like really answer that question, but any closing remarks, like, as I said, feel free to reach out and I'm always happy to do coffee chats and things like that. It's like very important to me to answer questions and answer people's questions clearly. And I know that like some of this stuff can be personal and you want to like talk about it in a more one-on-one setting, but like just again, bringing the fullness of your subjectivity and like just leaning deeply into who you are, I would say is a huge part of personal branding, and not being shy about showing people that. And people resonate with that. They will trust you more and it will pay dividends, I think, in whatever career path that you choose.
I love that, especially you just being true to yourself. Like I think that really spoke volumes throughout the presentation, and we really appreciate you taking the time to come and share some of your insights. I would encourage everybody, connect with each other and build out your professional network. I think that was something that we hit on during the presentation, but I just don't think enough people take advantage of those opportunities. So certainly take advantage, connect with each other, share your LinkedIn's, and build out that professional network. You never know when opportunities might arise, even if it is cross industries. Tosin had touched on that. Like, hey, those are those great opportunities to be able to do that. But we so appreciate you taking the time to jump in and provide us with some fantastic insight. I think everybody's walking away with at least one thing that they can take and really apply to what they're doing in whatever field they might be in. So thank you again for jumping in and providing us with some fantastic insight, Tosin.
Thank you. And thank you for being so active in the chat. It's very, very helpful to like see activity and things in there. And I 100% agree. I think one of the challenges with the school like WD is that you don't have the natural, I'm sitting next to this person in class, hey, what's your name? So like create it, right? Like you're doing it right now. And so pop your LinkedIn in there and actually connect with people. And like, I would even dare you to like do a Zoom coffee chat with these people so that you can take full advantage of the networking opportunities that school gives you.
Yes, I love that. And please do that because that would be fantastic if was sparked here in this session. So I share with everybody the questionnaire. We certainly would appreciate your feedback. Also, just remember the recording will be sent out, and certainly take advantage of more sessions just like this throughout Career Quest. So if this is your first session that you're attending, we have a few more that'll be running the rest of this week into next week. So certainly take advantage of that. But Tosin, thank you so much. Like we can't thank you enough for jumping in and providing this great insight. And thank you everybody for taking some time and jumping in today. We certainly appreciate it.
Bye.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.